Welcome back to another episode of Right Here in Mass. Joining us today is Dominic Amenta, the founder of DPA Communications. Dom is a marketing communications veteran with more than 21 years of experience handling a range of clients in the consumer, hospitality, lifestyle, sports, technology, business, special event, and philanthropic sectors. Dom, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I'd love if you could start off by sharing with our audience more about you and what you do.
Sure. My name is Dominic Amenta. I'm the founder and principal of DPA Communications. We are a PR and marketing agency celebrating our 11th year this past March, upcoming 12th year, this coming March, obviously. And basically, with the clients that we represent, we always get media coverage for them on behalf of whatever media outlets that are sharing their type of stories with their audiences. It's once upon a time we just used to brand ourselves as a PR agency, but as the times have changed and the media landscape has evolved, we've incorporated social media services into what we do, and also digital influencer campaigns as well. So I always kind of throw the marketing label in there in addition to us being a PR agency.
I love it. And backing up a little bit to the start of your career, what was it that made you actually want to pursue a career in PR in the first place?
It's funny. I didn't know that I wanted to pursue a career in PR. I had just graduated from school. I went down to Bryant University and got a degree in business management. Never took any communications classes or PR classes or anything in that realm. And I had gotten out of school. I was introduced to a friend of a friend who had said that she was working at a company called Regan Communications. And, I was like, oh, well, that sounds great. What do they do? And, she said, we work on, a handful of clients, getting them immediate media exposure. I'm like, okay, that sounds interesting. And she informed me that there was a spot opening up, basically being an administrative assistant to the founder of the company, George Regan. And I thought that sounded very interesting and exciting for someone like me just getting out of school and not really knowing what I wanted to do at the time. And then something that I really took a liking to is that my friend Stacy there had said her boss had first started out at that company in the position that I was going to be interviewing for. And
Oh,
he was to
interesting.
work he had worked his way up from that position all the way up to being a VP and team leader and representing a handful of clients that, kind of piqued my interest, like
Hmm.
Mohegan Sun and Dunkin Donuts and the Boston Celtics and all these kind of fun brands and businesses that I said, all right, well, let me roll the dice on what this thing is all about and hopefully interview for the position and see where that could lead me.
And now look at where you are after all of that.
Yeah, it's funny because it did kind of pan out the same way that her boss, Keith Gainsborough, who went on to run and still does run a successful agency here in Boston as well, kind of followed that similar path of working
Mhm.
close with George Regan for a little over a year and learning the business and bombarding him with questions about how he built his business and the ins and outs and strategies and all that. And then over the course of the 9.5 years working at Regan, worked under some phenomenal people and Christian Maglio and Tom Lee, and then went on to run my own team. And yeah, had a good 9.5 year run there.
Yeah, I love that. Since you hadn't really had any experience with PR prior to getting that position, did you find that there was a big learning curve with getting to understand the industry and what it was like? Or did you feel that you were kind of like being able to work your way through it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There was definitely a working my way through it. Again, like going into that company from scratch, not knowing even what it is that they had done really at the time, even during my first couple months. But again, like whether it was taking George and teams to different client presentations or picking them up from lunch, or again, even just having access to people that we would take from meeting to meeting. And there'd be times I'd get a chance to talk to CEOs of companies and leaders of media, media operations, and just it was kind of more of like a firsthand experience of learning what the industry was all about.
Mm,
By the time it was to get placed on a team, I had a good knowledge of what the industry was
right.
all about. A lot of learning to do at the same time too, and those first couple of years was truly learning like the craft of like writing media advisories and how to pitch and how to best form relationships organically and genuinely. But I think that year plus of working alongside George and some of the other teams kind of gave me a leg up when it was time to join a team.
I imagine. And after 9.5 years on the team, what was the moment that made you realize that you wanted to go off on your own and start DPA Communications?
So I would say probably in my maybe my eighth or ninth year there. And again, at the time, phenomenal company, phenomenal team, great client roster. And I don't know, like even throughout my whole entire life, I've always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. Um, and I'd always been happy at Regan, but there was just kind of something in me that maybe there was something else out there, maybe exploring more opportunities. And before actually launching DPA Communications, I was approached by friend in the city who had just recently opened up a marketing company and needed somebody to help build out that PR division. And he was working with a bunch of clients that I took an interest in and said, there's an opportunity to come in and, we can work with them on the PR level. And it wasn't exactly as advertised. And after spending a few
Mm.
months there and securing a couple of those clients that he had talked about and was able to bring in a couple of my own, I was having conversations with a couple people and was just like, if I were to go out and do this on my own, would you come along with me, or would you give me an opportunity to represent you? And they did. And those first two were the Living Room, which was a restaurant in Boston's North End, and an organization called Haymakers for Hope. And they
Mm.
said, sure, if you're gonna make a run at this on your own, then we'll give you a shot as well. And that's how DPA was formed.
That's awesome. And when you mentioned Haymakers for Hope, that's still one of your clients, correct?
It is. It is. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
one of my
wow.
first ones. And it's funny. Even I still remember meeting Andrew Myerson for the first time and trying to really convince him like I'm going to be your PR person from here on out. And yeah, they're still with us. Still with us 11 years later.
So that's a true and huge testament to your work of the fact that 11 years have gone by and you've still retained some of your clients that you had from the very first day, which is incredible.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I love that. And so once you went off on your own and started building up your client roster, what was that process like of then building out the team that you now have to support you and support the new clients that are coming in the door?
Sure. So, I mean, in the beginning, I was just a, one man show setting up at, different coffee shops or working out of different client, offices and back rooms or whatever, just, trying to make as good of a run of it as I can. And I would, I built up a pretty decent database of networks, affiliations, friends, just Boston's a small city, and the longer you
Yeah.
navigate it, the longer you find yourself 1 degree of separation from a lot of people. So, I would just people that I haven't talked to in a couple years, I'd reach out, see if they want to grab lunch, grab coffee, and just kind of let it be known that this is what I was doing. I was forming my own company, and if they happen to have anybody in their own respective circles that they thought might need PR services, then to give me a shout.
Yeah.
And it worked out well. And in terms of rounding out my own team, I was kind of, balancing that fine line of, okay, is it time to bring somebody on or keep making a run at this from a freelancer one person show? And that marketing agency that I spent 5 or 6 months at prior, there was a friend of mine within there who had just parted ways with them as well, a kid by the name of Jake Schuster. And he was looking for a new opportunity. I told him what I was doing, and he came alongside with me, and he helped me for the first, 3 or 4 years of really, going out and getting new clients, servicing those new clients, leading to new referrals, and really growing this thing.
Yeah. And so with that, what have been the challenges that you've faced throughout the 11 years of having your company?
A lot, like I'll tell you right now, there's that a lot of ups, a lot of downs, a lot of challenges, and a lot of rewarding situations. I'd say one of the challenges is when companies are looking at their marketing budgets. Um, you know, if anything goes awry, PR is usually the first to go.
Mhm.
Because PR is kind of looked at as you know, not a necessity, but a good thing to have if their marketing budgets allow it.
Yeah.
There's been times where we've signed clients and, excited because we know that as long as we keep doing good work and keep providing opportunities, then they'll stick with us. And that's been said with a lot of the clients that we represent. But if there's any economic instability or even pandemics that take shape over the course of a year and a half, having PR services is usually the first thing to go. So
Mhm.
it's always kind of balancing, making sure that we have, a good solid team in place, representing the client roster that we have, and always kind of making sure that the business is profitable and, our teams and our employees are profitable. And just always being prepared for if the shoe were to drop on the other foot and something were to, go as unexpected, but, trying to figure out how to kind of steer the ship from there on out.
Yeah, and I can definitely relate to that challenge is like, how do you make sure that the bulk of your clients aren't someone who will be affected by a recession? Like, how do you go and find those recession-proof industries or those recession-proof businesses that will always see the value of your services no matter what's happening, in a sense of things that you can't control, not being able to control a recession or anything like that?
Exactly, exactly. One of the things too is, when you look at some of the other PR agencies here in the Boston area, or even just throughout the country, some will, say that they specialize in a specific industry. You have some that say that they're consumer based or lifestyle based or tech based, nonprofit based, and not knowing exactly what those situations would be as we were growing DPA, but I always kind of knew that I never wanted to just service one or two specific types of industries because I had seen what have happened to other companies that just kind of specialize in one, and then for some reason that industry goes belly up, and and then so does the company, unfortunately.
Right.
So, kind of keeping ourselves, being more like general PR specialists and being able to work in any industry. Again, as we would never take on a client if we didn't think we'd be able to service them and service them successfully. But we've always kind of, presented ourselves as a, general PR specialist agency that can work in any and all industry to prevent anything like that from happening and really, destroying the company.
Yes, and I can imagine that that flexibility and opportunity to kind of flex your creative muscle has been able to help you bring in lots of those cool and exciting projects that you've had the opportunity to work on throughout the past 11 years.
Yes, it's definitely helped.
Yeah. And with that, what would you say have been some of your favorite projects to work on? Which is probably a loaded question to ask because I'm sure you have many.
It is. It is. I mean, like everybody that we work with, we enjoy working with them. That's
Yeah.
part of why, we take on what we do because we find the fun and enjoyment in whoever it is that we're working with, and whatever industry that they happen to be in. But I think some of the funner opportunities that we had a chance to work on probably come when I was starting out the company, because there was, like a level of, okay, like we're, this company's actually starting to grow and it's growing with these companies. So I think, I have an extra special love for some of the accounts that we first worked on when we opened up the company. And again, Haymakers is one of them. We worked with a spirits brand out of Rhode Island called Sons of Liberty Spirits. And that turned, that it started out as a 3-month project and ended up a, 4.5-year campaign, and a good friend to come out of it, the founder, Mike Rapucci, who we still, keep in touch with to this day. I'd say, maybe one of the best experiences I think happened to come with a company called Concepts. And they're a boutique sneaker shop that a friend of mine is actually the GM of. And we did a couple campaigns with them. And I, even at the ripe age of 45, I still love sneakers and designer sneakers. So having the opportunity to work with Concepts is something that I always cherished. And one particular campaign that they were doing with, I believe, was the 20th anniversary of Jay-Z's inaugural album, and they had a couple people from his Rockefeller group there at the store doing a meet and greet with fans and media. I think that was probably, one of the funnest things I have had the opportunity to work on.
Yeah, and it's probably one of those moments that you're like, "Wait a second, this is really my job? Like, this is what I get to do every day?" Those are, like, some of the best moments, that almost, like, surreal feeling that you've been able to create these opportunities for yourself and have really exciting things and accomplishments come out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, anytime anybody wants to work with us and we get rocking and rolling with them, we're always excited. But every once in a while, something that really touches to, what you like from a personal standpoint, and then having the opportunity to do some PR and social media work, on a client like that, yeah, it's extra rewarding.
Absolutely. And I can imagine that a big role of what you do within PR is being able to build relationships, which that in itself, of course, is important, but I can imagine it's probably time consuming. And so, how do you find yourself balancing cultivating relationships, whether it's with community members, potential clients, press contacts, and also being able to actually like execute the PR work? Do you kind of have like a system that you follow for being able to continue to grow your network and be able to push through your tasks?
Yeah, well, I don't have any particular processes per se or any, procedures or anything that we kind of, go through and check boxes against. I feel like a lot of the relationships and friendships I was able to develop over the course of my career probably came in, the majority of them came in probably the first 10 years.
Mm,
Being in Boston in your 20s, working at a PR agency and having an opportunity to, you know, go out and do a lot of extracurricular things past 6 p.m. On weekday nights, whether it was magazine launches or restaurant openings or whatever that may be. You'd always find yourself going to these things, linking up with some people that you've been pitching for the last year, and then going about the rest of the night with those same people. So, you started
mhm.
to build some like truly organic relationships and friendships, with people in media, with people that were working at other companies that went on to go on and do different things, but still stayed in touch. So I'd say, a lot of the relationships there. I'd say the one thing that I still do to this day is there's a group on the South Shore of Massachusetts called the Blue Hill Business Group, and they're kind of like this like really friendly business networking organization. About 25, 30 people strong. And it's not like your typical BNI group where it feels forced and you have to, refer business to one another or anything like that. It's truly just like a room of, you know, strong individuals, good individuals in their respective industries. And they're always just trying to figure out a way to connect the dots and, kind of take people from their network and introduce them to other people in the group. So that's still something that I do once a month. And occasionally, a new business opportunity will come out of that.
Yeah, and that's really exciting too. And I can imagine in addition to like focusing on building those press contacts as well. So you always have great sources to reach out to when the right story comes along.
Yeah, absolutely. On the press contact front too. Yeah, like relationships are everything. And again, it
Mhm.
helps when you happen to see them outside of normal business hours and actually see them face to face, like we're doing here.
Mhm.
And then, it's also, our team being good at their craft and, pitching them things that we know that they would be interested in writing about or showcasing on TV or interviewing on the radio. And that's also part of it too, where these media members they're getting bombarded with with inbound requests from other PR agencies and from other companies saying that you should feature us for reasons A, B, and C. But I feel like our team, especially, like we're really good at how to pitch. Making compelling arguments, not inundating their inboxes with things that are irrelevant to them. So I feel like we kind of cut through the clutter when we do end up in their inbox because they know that members of the DPA team are always going to present them things that are pretty much spot on with what they're looking to profile.
And as one of the people who receives your communications, I can fully attest to
I
that.
appreciate it. It's working.
There you go. And as the principal and founder of DPA Communications, how has your role shifted throughout the past almost 12 years? Like, are you still heavily involved in the client workload, the day-to-day stuff, or have you been able to kind of take that step back and focus more on the CEO responsibilities and growth?
I have the latter. I would say in the last 2, 3 years, especially, I'm always going to be involved in the day to day in some capacity. But right now we have a team of 8 people, which is probably the most people that DPA has ever had in our 11 and a half year history. And a huge reason for that is a colleague of mine by the name of Zach Galasso. He's been with me since 2016, I want to say. And we recently made him a partner in spring of this past year. For all of those reasons, he's really just kind of taken on clients as their own. He's really putting this company on his back at certain times. especially during the pandemic where, we didn't know what was going to happen with our industry and our company. And, he especially kind of took things on and put, matters into his own hands and elevated himself to a level where he's basically running a good majority of the accounts coming out of this company, which has allowed me to kind of look at DPA, from an overall business perspective and how to grow the business and make, more business informed decisions while he's running most of the accounts.
Mm.
And another colleague of ours, Emma O'Connor, who came to us the year after in 2017, same thing. She's an account director on the PR and the social media side. And, she runs a good number of accounts on her own and manages a couple of the staff here under her too. And again, because of Zach and Emma, it allows me to kind of look at DPA as a whole and make, more business decisions and more so than the day-to-day PR decisions.
Yeah, I love that. And I can imagine that each day likely looks pretty different for you depending on what's on your plate. But what are some of the things that you're primarily focusing on right now, or some of the projects that you have your hands on?
So some of our existing clients, so there's a restaurateur by the name of Brian Poe, chef owner. He's got the Tip Tap Room and Parish Cafe and Crane River Cheese Club, and he's one of those that started off with us with a couple initiatives and has been with us for I'd say about 4 years now, on the restaurant side, and another restaurateur by the name of Anthony Catarano. He has 4 restaurants between here and the North Shore, that have been keeping us busy with the number of things that they have going on. On the nonprofit side, the Girl Scouts of Eastern Massachusetts is is a very, very close one that, that's near and dear to our heart for the work that they do. Haymakers for Hope, which we talked about earlier, the Builders of Color Coalition, which is basically, making more opportunities for developers of color here in the state to bid on projects and actually get those projects. Trying to think, we have an immersive museum experience that's going to be launching in Boston in the next 3 weeks called the Wonder Museum in the
Mm.
financial district. With the emergence of the cannabis industry in recent years, we've found a few opportunities come our way for starting out with one of the first consumer products to market called Levia Seltzers. And then from there, it kind of led us to a company called MerryMed, who is basically one of the more prominent cannabis companies in the industry, well-regarded cannabis companies in the industry, and a couple other consumer products in the cannabis space too. So, like I was saying before, it really does run the gamut, but, the accounts that we have are keeping us busy.
Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned a few cannabis clients, which I think is interesting because it goes to show that likely what happens is you probably work with one company within a particular industry like that. Other companies within the sector see the incredible work that you can do, and then it kind of just rolls out from there with being able to bring more companies like that within to your client roster. Is that what you say would kind of led to that?
Yeah, basically, I mean, and I
Yeah.
would say that, trying to explain, or, it's not like advertising. It's not like if you were in advertising saying, hey, you should advertise with us because if you pay for this billboard, you'll have a number of eyes, which will lead to results A, B, and C. With PR, you can never guarantee what's going to come as a result. But
Mhm.
what you can show is, recent client experience. So whenever we do get an introduction to somebody else in the cannabis industry who's heard about us or who've heard about our work, we always say up front, we know going to get you the press coverage that matters to you most. We can't guarantee what we're going to get to you, but here's a recent look at what we've done over the last 6 months. And usually when they take a look at that press coverage, they're very impressed by it, and usually quickens the cycle of them saying, all right, let's make the decision to work with you and your DPA team.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that, of what you mentioned of not being able to guarantee things, which is a huge thing that people should keep in mind with any type of marketing service that they're hiring for. Is that one struggle that you find people might be like a little bit hesitant about is like whether or not you can guarantee certain placements for them? Because obviously anyone who can guarantee that stuff, you probably shouldn't give them your money anyway.
That's correct. Yeah, that's always part of my spiel too. I always tell them, not only can we not guarantee you what we're going to get you, and if anybody else is guaranteeing you, then they're lying to you because
Yeah.
nothing is guaranteed in our industry. It's all about the relationships with reporters, knowing what media outlets are looking for, your previous results, client testimonials. Something that we always do too is in our PR proposals, we always give a list of references in their emails to say, if you want to reach out and and get an assessment of what it's like working with us with no heads up prior from us, then please do so. But that question typically comes up 8 out of 10 times, where they say,
Mm.
well, can you guarantee? I say no. And I say, I hope that the work that we've done in the last several months kind of speaks for ourselves and gives you the confidence to put your PR dollars with us.
Yeah, I love that. And so with that, what's like your favorite type of PR to focus on? Is it like events? Is it getting clients on a radio station? Or you might even have a few favorites?
Yeah, I would say TV. TV's a little bit tougher,
Yeah.
and tougher in the fact that it's not like digital where there's always opportunities in digital. It's a big, huge,
Mm.
landscape for for a media outlet to be putting out new content. Same goes for radio, but TV when there's a set schedule, whether it's they only have a half-hour program every day or half-hour program every week, and there are a lot of people vying to try and get the products and services on this program. But TV takes a little bit more time, a little bit more effort, but when that TV press hit does come through, there's a little extra celebration of getting the client on TV, whether it's like a NBC 10 Hub Today or a WCVB Chronicle or a Ness and Dining Playbook. When we secure that TV hit, a little extra proud when we do so.
Yeah, and I can imagine it's very gratifying to have that happen and just know that everything that you've done in terms of work up to getting that point, now it's finally worth it, and you realize that it ended up with a really great result, which is awesome.
Absolutely. And the same thing goes for like national coverage as well too. Like anything outside of the
Mhm.
local regional front, if we're ever able to secure, a national placement for a client of ours, obviously the client's extremely happy, and like you said, it's very very gratifying for us too that we're able to secure something on the national landscape, featuring our clients.
Absolutely. And for any company who's potentially thinking about hiring a PR firm like DPA Communications within the new year, what advice would you give to them in terms of getting started, or what would you say are some things that they should know before they start working with a PR agency?
Yeah, well, they should, again, they should know that whatever it is that they're trying to do to market their product, that they know that by getting into local and regional media outlets, in their daily newspapers, in a couple of these digital outlets that we're talking about, or on specific radio shows, that they're confident that by being profiled in these media outlets, that will impact their business positively.
Mm.
And again, that could be a number of reasons. Sometimes people are just trying to increase revenue. Sometimes they're trying to increase talent for the company. Maybe there's a mid to long term game plan where they're trying to get purchased or acquired or secure investment capital. So whatever that end goal is, they have to do something internally to realize that, okay, we know that PR has to be a part of our game plan to accomplish these things that we set out to accomplish in this past year. So
Mhm.
don't go into PR blindly. Like really know that you want PR as part of your marketing campaign before you start reaching out, so you don't have to have those uncomfortable conversations of trying to have the PR agency sell you and working with them. It's always best when they know that they need or want PR, um, and that being the first step to having the conversations with PR agencies like ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. And I can imagine that going along with that, having someone who's involved in the process and really proactive can likely go a long way too, in terms of clients really being up to par on things and making sure they're getting you what you need when you need it.
A huge part of it too. Like,
Yeah.
right from the onset, we'll say, we'll do like an onboarding document to say, there are times when media will need things in a very timely manner, and how can we best get in touch with you if you're not around by email, and just making sure you have things at the ready, like high res images or
Hmm.
shared Google Drives, whatever that may be. Just letting know that a lot of the times will be very strategic and um, you know kind of like more long-term planning in terms of how we're going to get press coverage. And then on the fly, sometimes a reporter will tell us that they're working on a story and they need things by 5 o'clock.
Yeah,
And if they do, let's make sure that we're ready for those opportunities as well.
definitely. And now that you have 8 team members and you're about to enter your 12th year in business, what would you say is next for DPA Communications and how you'd like to grow and expand what you're doing?
Great question. Great question. In terms of company size, eight feels right.
Yeah.
Eight feels good. And given the client roster that we have right now, there's a nice blend of number of people that are here. Their workloads are not overly flowed, and they're able to work on these accounts. Now, to say if we were to get a couple new client opportunities, then we would probably take steps to grow the business. But we have a 1,200 square foot space here in the North End. And if you were to look out into the room right now, there's not too much more space to put a couple more employees. So, and we've been here since 2016. So I think
Mhm.
Zach and Emma and a couple of the other people who've been here for a while, keep dangling it out there that it'd be nice to move into a little bit of a bigger office someday. And my sentiments exactly. I'd love to be able to move into a bigger office someday soon too. Hopefully in the same neighborhood. So, maybe if all goes well in the next 6 months or so, we'll be looking at a little bit of a different and bigger space.
Exciting. I think the North End is a great spot. So I love that you're in that location and knowing that you have worked with restaurants. I mean, there's so many restaurants, of course, around there that are really great to surround yourself with.
Yeah, there really are. There's no shortage of restaurants in and around the neighborhood here for lunch and dinner, and I think we've all packed on a few extra pounds from for all the dining options. But the food really is unbelievable in this neighborhood.
Love it. And for anyone who's listening to this episode who is either currently in the PR industry with their career or they're looking to get into it, what advice would you have to give to them in terms of just being able to build up their career and be successful with it?
Absolutely. I would say that if you just graduated college and you want to get into the PR industry, um, I would say look to try and go work for an agency first.
Mm,
Um, Again, there's probably no shortage of internal PR opportunities at brands or companies or industries that they may love at the time. And if they know I want to get into the sneaker industry, again, New Balance is here, Puma is here, Reebok is here. So, maybe go down that path. But if you're really looking to get into PR, you're not sure exactly what industry you want to work on, try and go work for an agency, an agency like ours where they represent a bunch of different companies and a bunch of different industries. And there you'll be introduced to a bunch of different things and learn what you might want to do for a career. So that's usually the traditional path. You get out of school, go work for a PR agency, and then after a few years, you may realize I would really love to work just with nonprofits. So I'd really just love to work on consumer products.
mm.
And then you can either do the agency route or then take it from there and say I want to go work for this particular brand or company and doing this 40 hours a week
Yeah.
versus it's spread across 3 4 different industries.
Great advice. And as we get towards the end of this episode, one of my favorite questions to ask our guests is what their favorite local businesses are to support. So I'd love if you could share the places that you love to support, shop at, frequent, all of that good stuff.
Good question. Good question. In addition to obviously the clients that we are working at any given time, and any previous clients that we've been fortunate to work with in the past, I'd say on a local level, on a neighborhood level, there's a small little Mexican restaurant called Tenoch, which is half a block away from our office that I feel like half of the office frequents 2 or 3 times a week. Um, and us just being in the neighborhood, there's a restaurant here in the neighborhood called Preza, which is one of our clients that we frequent often. But we really do love to try new places in and around the neighborhood too, just because we always find ourselves walking to and from work or walking on lunch breaks and doing errands. So we kind of found ourselves being woven into the fabric of the neighborhood. So, there's a couple of us that will get our hair cut, up the block. And there are some of the girls here that, they go to one of the salons that's nearby. So, I get, one of the good things about working in a neighborhood like the North End, there's, a lot of things that you can enjoy and experience. And, we take pride in making sure that we do and just trying to be a good neighbor at the same time.
Yeah, I love that. Dom, this has been such a great episode, and I've really appreciated having the opportunity to have you come on and share more about you and everything that you're doing at DPA Communications. And now I'd love it if you could share with our listeners where they can find you online in case they'd like to connect with you further.
Sure thing. So our website is www.dpacommunications.com. If you wanted to follow social channels, we're very active on Instagram, where our handle is at DPACOMM, DPACom. And if anybody ever wanted to reach out to us about the industry as a whole, or even to potentially think about working alongside us, they could always send an email to hello@dpacommunications.com.
Perfect. And I will link to those in the show notes so that way our listeners can click through and connect with you all from there. But thank you so much again for coming on today's show.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on today, Ashley. Good chatting with you.